Hello, I'm Ted Leverette, the original business buyer advocate. For more than 30 years, I've been helping people find and buy the right businesses the right way. I'm not a business broker. I don't sell businesses. Most of my presentations are aimed at buyers, but brokers and sellers and other people tune in because they want to see how the savviest buyers are thinking and acting. The topic today, small and mid-sized businesses. We're going to talk about the buying, the selling, the borrowing, the pricing, and deal making during the pandemic and during the financial crisis. You're going to hear John Martinka, longtime friend of mine, business associate. He's known as the escape artist. He's a transaction broker for people wanting to exit employment and for people wanting to exit their business. So John, welcome aboard. Let's talk about the big picture. What's happening out there, the near term, what's going on the playing field. And I'm talking about the buyers and sellers, and particularly during this pandemic.
Well, thank you, Ted. And I think the first thing that needs to be said is when you ask what's the big picture, what are the near-term expectations, is nobody really knows for sure. We all have our guesses, we all have our hopes, but anyone who says they really know what's going to happen and when, the BS meter's over in the red zone. Now, if you ask me what my thoughts are that this is going to be with us for a while. There was a study by Live Oak Bank I got recently that said approximately 75% of small, mid-sized, and lower middle market businesses have seen some kind of decline in sales. That's a huge number. That is so much more than in the Great Recession of the late 2000s decade. And there's no vaccine. And as we record this, cases are growing again in what is the first wave of the virus. And so people are a little bit scared of what's going on, and they're going to be apprehensive. And combined with that, I get calls regularly, and someone will say, I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of deals on businesses out there. And my response is, yeah, there's going to be a lot of deals on businesses, but not on the ones that survived or thrived during the crisis.
Whoa.
So anything else on that?
No, but that's a pretty powerful thought. So basically what you're saying is the businesses that were good before the crisis and that are surviving now, they're not going to be bargains on those because those businesses are good enough to stand on their own and there'll be buyer competition. Is that it?
There's no way they're going to be sold at a discount. They might even be sold at a premium. There aren't going to be deals on those businesses. And realize no matter how good the buyer is, no matter qualified, savvy, sophisticated, on those businesses, the seller's going to control the deal. Now, if it's not a very good business, if it's really been hit hard by the virus crisis, yeah, the buyer can control the deal. But the good businesses are going to sell for the upper end of the fair price range. How's that?
Okay, let's talk about what's happening with the free money. The government's doling out free money. They're doling out cheap money with the hopes of helping these businesses. I'm beginning to think some of these businesses are going to wish they didn't get it. What should the buyers, or at least the searchers, be doing to interpret this flood of money that's going to these businesses and the employees? How do they account for that in 2020?
Well, I think you have to look at where's the money been used in those businesses and how, and has it helped? Now, from an accounting perspective, my CPA has told me that, my clients who got the Paycheck Protection Program loans, it's recorded as a liability until it's forgiven. So it doesn't go in as income. I can think of one client, and I don't want to get into too many details, but they got the Paycheck Protection Program. Their business has not been taken a hit from the virus yet. Now, they also work on a lag, so they had a lot of jobs in their pipeline. We don't know what's going to happen 3 months from now, 6 months from now, when that pipeline may not be as robust as it has been. So there's just a lot of questions about that. Now, there's another part of it too, in that with that CARES Act, the SBA loans, the SBA is picking up 6 months of payments for the borrower directly to the bank. And it's for any SBA loan closed by somewhere near the end of September. I've heard multiple dates, so it's like the 25th or 27th of September. If your loan is in the works by then, you're going to get 6 months of payments. And I've got clients who's already are receiving those waived payments, or the SBA is making them, is the best way to say it.
So if a loan closes in September and there's 6 months waived, that gets it out to the end of the spring of 2021. What if that owner wanted to sell that business during that time period? Could the buyer step in and inherit that free finance, or at least the deferment? It's not even deferment, it's a waiver of the payments, right?
It's a payment made by the SBA. So that's a good question, because normally when we talk about this, it's about a new SBA loan to purchase a business. Now, to the best of my knowledge, SBA loans are not assumable. So that, I don't think that would apply, but I'm not a banking expert. That's what bankers have told me.
Well, let's talk about banking. What are you hearing from the sources of financing?
That is not only it's a great question, because it is a great question, but it's a very timely question, because just a couple of weeks ago, Jessica and I did a survey of 10 bankers representing 8 banks, and we got a load of information. So I'll just summarize it into some bullet points. Banks are going to be cautious. Now, the banks I work with, they have not been free and easy, believe me. They're going to be more cautious now. As one banker said, we're going to go back to the old style of banking for sure. And if you remember the 5 C's of banking, which sort of faded out about 15 years ago and have been back, they're going to be stronger than ever. I think you're going to see a lot of good banks who are, not just looking at a transaction, are going to want a higher down payment than the SBA minimum for an SBA loan. They're going to want a little more seller financing. Stress tests is a big term with banks these days. They're going to be looking at what happens if revenues go down 30%. 30% was the number mentioned a few times. There's going to be some real interesting tests to see what will happen if that happens, or how did it look if 2019 went down by 30%. But probably most important in that regard is probably what has jumped to the top of the list is, what has the business done this year? What are the month-by-month financials showing? How do they compare to the last year or two on a monthly basis? And as one banker told me very specifically, although the others indicated it, the buyer of a business, the borrower, if it's a seller, comes in, or I shouldn't say seller, I should say owner, if they're looking for a different kind of loan than an acquisition loan. The more they know, the more they've done their homework, the more they can present any kind of projections with realistic explanations, not just, oh, things are going to be great because it's going to be over, are going to get loans a lot easier. And one bank actually said, we look at the source of referral to that prospective client. If it's someone we know and trust and we figure they're in good hands, they're going to get a little more favorable treatment than someone walking in off the street.
So,
and this goes back to something I've had for my clients for years, and it's a 10-point package they should put together for the bank. Now, when I first put it together, they would put it in a binder and take it into the bank with tabs, and it was a great impression, instead of just, oh, here's 3 years of tax returns, what will you lend me? And I always said, get a letter from the seller saying why you are their choice to buy the business. Now it's all done electronically, but stuff like that's more important than ever. that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And also, it seems like what you're saying is, to some extent, the applicant's advisory team can influence the lender
Definitely.
by the quality of the team. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Wow. Now, we talked about the numbers, the money, and I suppose cash flow is important. I know when I've worked with buyers, I encourage them to do a doomsday scenario, not like a pandemic, because that's not something we anticipated until a few months ago. But we do look at just how far could this business dive into the dirt and still survive. And if we see a way out of the doomsday scenario, then I recommend, or at least I support my buyers who want to buy the business. So banks are going to be looking at those doomsday scenarios. Is that it?
That's what a stress test really does.
Okay. Well,
and you mentioned nobody could see the pandemic. I have a good friend who does risk management and crisis planning for businesses. Even he said, never did I think there would be a pandemic to be included in crisis planning. He deals with earthquakes and power outages and criminals, and they do role-playing things to see how would we handle this. Never thought of it.
Okay, lenders looking at a package, maybe a buyer's looking at a business. What if we jump off the financial statements and look at the non-financial factors? I created this acronym. I know you know it, but our listeners may not. CELBS, CELBS, standing for customers, employees, landlord, bank, and suppliers. So my question is, to what degree are the bankers looking more to those, some people say the soft issues, the non-financial issues?
Well, a lot of the bankers I know do look at those things, have looked at those things, and of course should be looking at those things like we do. They're more important than ever. I'll give you a couple examples. I know of a banker who customer concentration scares the bejeebers out of them. They won't look at things with that certain level of customer concentration. And realizing most small, mid-sized businesses have some kind of concentration. It's just inherent if you're doing 2, 5, 10 million that you could have a dominant customer. Other banks don't seem as bothered by it if there are factors that lead to some comfort. It must be about 3 or 4 years ago, a banker told me they were making a loan and they were really concerned about the supplier. There's one dominant supplier to this company, and they did due diligence on the supplier, because if that supplier went away, bye-bye loan. So those things are as important as ever. The lease situation with everything going on, landlords are, on one hand, they need the tenants, so they may be cutting deals. On the other hand, they may be saying, I'm getting hurt everywhere, I'm not giving a deal here. We don't know. Again, that falls into that. We don't know. But I think there are some other things that have cropped into this, the non-financial factor analysis. Government intervention. Is your business essential or non-essential? I was doing exit planning for a company. They distribute to the coffee and espresso shop, restaurants, hospitals, etc., coffee machines, supplies, equipment, etc. Most of their customers got shut down. Government intervention. What's the cost of safety going to be to the company as they bring people back? Again, we talked about the very recent history. What's going on? What's the COVID effect? Short, medium, long term. There are banks now that have COVID questionnaires that they insist on being answered about what the virus has done to that business. And just think about what customer demand is. We talk about customers when there's in-person relationships and activity is required. What's going to happen? Are they going to rush out to the beaches in California and Florida, or are they going to hang back and be very cautious?
Whoa.
So,
well, how is this going to affect multiples? And by multiples, I mean that number of people multiply by profit or cash flow or whatever the baseline is that they see is going to be a return on investment. That risk factor, the thing called multiples.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what a multiple is before I directly answer that question, because you don't pull a multiple out of the air. I get asked all the time by people, well, what's the multiple for this business? What's the multiple for this industry? And I don't know. I have no idea what it is, but if you tell me something about the business and the industry, I'll let you know. Because as we just talked about non-financial factors, the easiest example is the company with 70% of their sales to 3 customers is going to have a lower multiple than one with 70% of their sales to 70 customers, all other things being equal. So a multiple is made up of the factors of the business, its history, its non-financial factors, and its projections. Yes, and there are generally accepted ranges. We don't have to get into the details, but for different size businesses, from micro to small to medium to lower middle market, there are ranges where these things always seem to fall into, no matter what the owner thinks that their business is so special. So that background said, I think it goes back to what we started out in this interview here, is that a good business is not going to see their multiple change. If businesses in that industry sold for an average of 4 to 5, they're going to sell for an average of 4 to 5, and might even be 4.5 to 5. And the bad businesses, the ones that were hurt, they're the ones that are going to suffer. They're going to see values and prices go down. And those owners that see that and still want to get out are going to take a hit over what they expected and might have got a year ago. And I think that's adding, Ted, I think that's adding a lot of opportunity to the market for growth by acquisition. Because if the pure financial buyer, the person coming out of the job situation, and it's not, and is that person, he or she is not going to buy a company that's seeing their income don't go down in half and they don't know about the future, someone in the industry might pick them up, pay a little more, but not what they would have got again a year ago. And it might be the salvation for those owners who say, I am not going to rebuild again. I've done it a few times in my career. And I think it could be a win-win, should be a win-win, and could even maybe provide that seller with a job for a few more years.
Well, let's carry that. Let's go across that bridge into deal structure. What's going to change?
Well, I think you're going to see, and all indications we're already starting to see it, more seller financing, more cash at closing from the buyer, more earnouts. In other words, the total price of the business is a function of what it does in the future. Now, let's look at that, because so many of these deals in the small mid-size market are SBA loan finance. So the bank makes the loan, the SBA guarantees 3/4 of it or more to the bank. And it's a great program, 10-year amortization, now up to $10 million. Cash flow lender, doesn't mean they don't have to have collateral to fully support the loan. And they don't allow earnouts. But what they do allow are clawbacks or negative seller notes, negative earnouts, whatever you want to call them. And I had one of these happen about a year ago. Client bought a company at, I'm just gonna make the numbers are close, but I think it was a $4 million price and 20% was at risk because of a dominant customer. And the clawback was over 2 years. And if they hit certain numbers each of those years, half of the loan became live. If they didn't hit those numbers, it was clawed back. You can do that with an SBA loan as long as it meets debt coverage requirements from day one, as if it was all being paid from day one. So I think you're going to see a lot more of the creative stuff on deals. Just like you're going to see more COVID-related due diligence and more emphasis on current financial statements, you're going to see creativity.
And just to be sure for people listening to this, what you're talking about in clawback, we're talking about the amount of financing the seller provides the buyer.
Right. Okay. Which ties into my first thing, there's going to be more seller financing.
Got it.
Because you see more deals with the potential clawback.
Well, now what about the sellers? Or how about the owners who are thinking, okay, it's 2020, I just don't want to live through this anymore. I think I'll just get out. What do they need to do to be marketable? in 2020.
So really what you're saying, Ted, is when the owner is thinking the pain of rebuilding is greater than the pain of selling for what I would get now, I'll sell for what I can get now. They're gonna move to sell it. The other ones, they got to do all the things they should have been doing over the years when they were coasting through the last 8 or 10 years of a good economy. And they got to, it's blocking and tackling. It's paying attention to the basics. It's paying attention to the selves, the non-financial factors. And, looking at growth not as, hey, this is more work, but this makes me more valuable. To me, that's what they should be doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Any closing comments?
Well, I think borrowers, business buyers have to be more prepared than ever. They have to do research on the industry. They have to know some of the specifics of what's going on. They can't just walk into a bank again and throw 3 years of tax returns on the table and say, what will you lend me? It's relationship from broker to seller to banker, all the way through. And people are going to, more than ever, sell to someone they like and trust. It's legacy, not just money, but there's going to be more money at risk for the seller, but it's also legacy. So
John,
those would be my closing tips.
Well, I appreciate it. John Martinka, how do people get in touch with you?
My website is martinkaconsulting.com, MARTINKA consulting.com.
Okay, I'm Ted Leverette, the original business buyer advocate with Partner on Call Network. Thanks for listening and be safe out there, folks.